Paul actually tried to bring congressional war powers back to Congress. He actually wanted to halt the ability for NATO to declare war without congressional approval, brought the amendment to the NDAA, that is the National Defense Authorization Act. That is where they decide on the government, defense budget spending. So he wanted to add this amendment to this year's NDAA saying that NATO needs to, NATO just can't declare war because of Article 5. Yes, NATO has Article 5 that states that if any country inside of NATO is attacked, that all of the countries will come to its defense as if we ourselves have been attacked. That's Article 5. What Rand Paul wanted to do, Senator Rand Paul wanted to say, okay, we've got Article 5 in NATO, but still it doesn't matter. NATO cannot just wage war on behalf of America. We still have a constitution, and that constitution says Congress must declare war. So even if it's in NATO, even if it's Article 5 in NATO, Congress still ultimately has to be the ones to declare war. We can't just allow NATO generals to march us into war. This was voted on today in the Senate, and it failed. It actually failed. We're going to actually watch the arguments here. This is Rand Paul, and so this is Republicans and Democrats arguing about whether or not Congress should be declaring war rather than NATO. Watch this.
My amendment reasserts that Article 5 of the NATO Treaty does not supersede Congress's power under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of our Constitution to declare war. According to our Constitution, we resort to war only after the people's elected representatives deliberate and determine that it is in our best interest. My amendment is also consistent with the NATO Treaty. Article 5 of the treaty commits allies to respond to an attack, but allows each ally to determine whether to engage in military hostilities. Article 11 of the NATO Treaty states its provisions are to be carried out by each country's constitutional process. We cannot delegate our responsibility to NATO, nor are we expected to. Let us reaffirm that Article 5 does not supersede Congress's responsibility to declare war.
Mr. President.
The senator from New Jersey.
I rise in opposition. Senator Paul's amendment is both entirely unnecessary, but worse than that, it's dangerous. There's no question that, like any other treaty, the NATO treaty does not supersede the Constitution. However, specifically calling out Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty here erroneously implies that there is a tension between it and the Constitution. This sends a damaging message about the U.S. commitment to the alliance at a time when support for NATO is as critical as ever, given Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Further, by only referencing the NATO treaty, Senator Paul's amendment erroneously implies that other treaties may supersede the Constitution, a proposition that no senator would accept. Because Senator Paul's amendment is both unnecessary and harmful at a critical time of our engagement in Ukraine, I urge all senators to vote against it, and I reserve the balance of the time.
President.
Senator from Kentucky.
How much time do I have remaining?
Minute remaining.
I think it should be an easy vote to affirm the Constitution. To vote against affirming the Constitution actually places doubt in the Constitution. The power to declare war is the most important power and the most important vote that any legislator will ever entertain. Why is this important? Because in 2001, people voted to go to war, and this body still thinks that that vote binds us to war with no further vote. We do need to reaffirm the power and the necessity of declaring war because we are ignoring it by continuing to be involved in military activity and war around the globe without ever having voted on it as we are mandated by the Constitution.
Mr. President, is there any time remaining on our side?
53 seconds remaining. Senator from Rhode Island.
I will be very brief. My understanding of the War Powers Act, the President of the United States may initiate hostilities for a limited period of time until Congress can act. This proposal, a sense of Congress, would call into question what the War Powers Act authorizes, and that is a constitutional provision. It's been held constitutional.
Oh my gosh, this is just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, look, it is Congress's job to vote on whether or not the United States goes to war. It is, yes, a treaty inside of NATO, Article 5, but that doesn't negate the fact that Congress would need to uphold that treaty with the vote. That is an argument that could be made when the vote goes to Congress, right? When, let's say, one of the NATO allies is invaded and Article 5 is triggered, Congress then, members of Congress could then argue with each other and say, we made a deal. It's a treaty. We must adhere to it. Our promise, the American promise, is good for what? And they could have that argument and then they could vote. And my guess is they would vote to go to war and uphold Article 5 in NATO. But it shouldn't be automatic. And by the way, there are a lot of treaties that the United States has signed that are not honored by Congress. It's not automatic. I mean, these Democrats are arguing that Article 5, because it's a treaty, it's automatic. That's not true. Look at all the treaties that we made with Native Americans that we don't adhere to at all. We just throw them by the wayside and act like they don't exist. We ignore treaties constantly. So, I mean, it happens on a regular basis. So for them to say, well, no, we made it, it's a treaty, we've got it, it's Article 5, it automatically triggers, that is not true. Congress should absolutely vote on this. But instead, Congress never wants to vote on going to war because they know it's political suicide to take Americans into war, especially if Article 5 is triggered for a country like Montenegro. Do you even know where that is? Suddenly you're sending off your young men to war in Montenegro, and you don't even know where that is. They know it's political suicide, so they don't want to have to put their names on it. That's why they ultimately don't want to vote. They'd rather leave it with the generals, leave it with the president, and keep it out of Congress. That is why Congress is the most ineffective branch of our government. They're just bought off, worrying about campaigning all the time, worrying about keeping their seats, and it's ridiculous. And also with Article 5, it does need to be debated with Congress, because what is an attack? There have been times when NATO countries go at it with each other and they're attacking one another. This happens with Turkey, Greece and Turkey. We must have the debates. We must have the discussions. There needs to be nuance. What constitutes an attack? What if it's very small? Is that suddenly we're going to war? What if these are the types of nuances that need to be debated in Congress. That's why it should go to Congress. It is built into our Constitution, and yet here you've got a bunch of Democrats and a lot of Republicans wanting to dismiss the Constitution. In fact, the vote record, it was 16 yeas to 83 nays in the Senate. All 16 were Republicans. So there, what happened to the Democrats being the anti-war party doesn't exist. Instead, it's Republicans who voted for this measure that Congress would need to vote to go to war. And it was a bunch of Democrats and some Republicans who voted against that. You've even got Democrats or independents like Bernie Sanders. He voted against this. Bernie Sanders, of all people, voted against this. Warren Elizabeth voted against this. So did Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham. So there you go, a bunch of warmongers. I never thought I would see the day Bernie Sanders would be a warmonger, but here he is. He usually was the one you could count on to always vote against all this crap, and yet he's just fallen in line. I don't understand it, but there you go. If Article 5 is triggered, there will be no congressional vote. The American people won't truly have a say. We didn't have a say when they added all these countries into NATO. We had no say in that. They added them in one by one, countries you've never heard of or even know where they are on a map. And now we just end up at war, and there's no congressional vote. What's the point? What's the point of even having a constitution at this point? When it comes to just censor everybody and march us into war, what's the point of having a constitution? All right, I want to tell you about Relief Band. Relief Band is the #1 FDA-cleared anti-nausea wristband that has been clinically proven to quickly relieve and effectively prevent nausea and vomiting associated with motion sickness, anxiety, migraines, hangovers, morning sickness, chemotherapy, and so much more. And now you can use your HSA and FSA funds to get a Relief Band. I can tell you firsthand that Relief Band actually does work. I have this. I've been using it for several years. I get really bad motion sickness. When I go to amusement parks, which I love to go to, roller coasters really do me in. Driving long distances in cars, I can't sit in back seats of cars. That really, I get really sick. Boats, oh, I don't even want to think about a boat. But I can now because I started using Relief Band. I've tried everything else. I've tried pills. Those just knocked me out. That was no fun. I've tried the pressure point bands, that are supposed to push a pressure point on your wrist or something. Those didn't really work either. Relief Band is the only thing that actually really does work for me. And I hope it works for you because nauseousness is no fun at all. And what this does is it gives you a little sensation like not like a shock, like it hurts or anything, but kind of like a little buzz on your wrist over and over. And you could turn up the intensity so it could be really light or it could be really more intense. And it sends signals to your brain that ultimately end up taking the nausea away. And it really does cut the nausea down. I've been able to finally ride some roller coasters wearing the Relief Band. I definitely don't get as sick on a boat, which is really great. So it really does work. So whether you need everyday nausea relief or you just need occasional cure from nausea like I do, their patented technology makes feeling sick a thing of the past. Relief Band is legitimately a band that you wear on your wrist to give you relief from nausea, and it can change, for depending on how you're feeling, you can change that intensity. So head to reliefband.com and get 20% off your Relief Band, as well as free shipping when you use the promo code Kim at checkout.